Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan, and today I have something extremely personal to tell you about that I love to death and I couldn't recommend enough to you. There is a thing called a TV show called The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. And this is a thing like Goosebumps. However, it's not for the whole show. Now, I do think that the whole show in general is amazing and that everybody would love it. Anybody who watches the show, I've never heard a single person tell me they didn't love the show after they saw at least one segment or one full two-part episode themselves. This show is great. One of the best cartoons I've ever seen in my life, possibly my favorite cartoon of all time, alongside Ed, Edd n Eddy. I love a lot of cartoons, especially from the 90s and early 2000s. I was born in 94, so that was naturally my era for cartoons and stuff. And Cartoon Network was much bigger and much more important when I was a kid. And then on like Disney Channel, you had so many good things like Brandy and Mr. Whiskers and Dave the Barbarian that no one talks about. But Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy was always my big thing. And there was, how many seasons of this show was there? It says 7 on IMDb, but I'm assuming that's like 4, actually. Anyway, for season 2, episode 15, there is an episode called Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween. It premiered on October 31st, which is Halloween of 2003. Now, when it came out, my sweet grandparents, oh, I hit the camera and everything. My sweet grandparents also found a DVD released by Cartoon Network called 9 Creepy Cartoon Capers. And that episode, that 23-minute long episode, is on this DVD. With a bunch of other assorted things. They used to do this back in the day, where Cartoon Network and Disney and Nickelodeon would put out DVDs where they would have a bunch of different shows, holiday episodes or Halloween episodes or anything like that. They don't do that anymore for whatever reason. I think because those channels are basically dying and don't have anything worth watching anymore. But this is something I have watched. This episode, Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween, every year. Every Halloween since it premiered. I watched it the night it premiered on that Halloween night in 2003. I watched it that day, right? Fell in love with it. One of my favorite things of all time. Probably my favorite cartoon episode of all time, of anything at all. Again, Billy and Mandy's probably my favorite animated show of all time, or possibly TV show for all time. I've been watching this episode every single Halloween, or at least October. Sometimes more than once in that October, every single year for the last 16 years. I know it sounds obnoxious, I know it sounds stupid, but I stand firm with the fact that it's incredible and I love it. I love this DVD box set. The next thing like Goosebumps video I'm going to do as well is a video about Johnny Bravo's episode on this DVD called Bravo Doobie Doo, which you can assume probably what it's about, but we'll get there when we get there. 9 Creepy Capers is such a cool DVD. But this particular episode, Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween, I love it so much. And I would love, since all of it's available on Amazon Prime and digital in general, I could not recommend enough to you. If you have not seen Billy and Mandy before, if you have not seen this episode of Billy and Mandy, you need to. Especially with this episode for this month. With October and Halloween's coming up in a couple of weeks, not even that. I think you could not possibly regret buying this. And if you buy it on Amazon Prime, I'm sure it's like $2 for an episode. But this is so good, you know, and this is not your typical Billy and Mandy or Cartoon Network episode for that general kind of format they go for. They typically, just like Nickelodeon did in the 90s and early 2000s, have one episode have 2 or 3 different segments of different shorts put on there, like 10 or 15 minutes long each, to fill up that 30-minute time slot on TV. This is not the case. It's not like with Billy and Mandy's usual format of having just a bunch of different stories for one 30-minute segment or episode, collection, whatever. This has one whole 20-something minute long episode of this whole story, and it's great, and I love it to death. It's timeless. It is the best thing to watch at Halloween, in my opinion. I know a lot of people feel that way about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. I know a lot of people feel like that about the Michael Myers films. I disagree. I think this is the best. I think anybody who grew up on this episode or who grew up on this DVD and remembers this episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's perfect. It is a perfect TV anything. It's a perfect animated anything, in my opinion. Everything from the animation style, which has always been very smooth with Billy and Mandy, to just the feeling and the capturing of Halloween and fall time in general on this episode. Now, the thing is, I will probably not be talking all the time about Halloween specials of different shows like Roseanne or Boy Meets World or anything like that. There's a lot of them out there. Pretty much every sitcom ever has done Halloween specials at one point or another. I probably won't be talking about every single Halloween special to ever exist. Not because of time restraint or anything like that, but usually because they're not as important or they tie in too much to an overall story to really be able to be segregated from everything else in the show. But this is an exception. So is the Bravo Doobie-Doo episode I want to review after this, because of how different they are from most of their material. Now, for anybody who doesn't know the general premise of The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy as a show, not just this episode that I'm talking about, basically a boy and a girl had a bet with the Grim Reaper himself, who's just called Grim, and Billy and Mandy themselves are the people who tricked the Grim Reaper, and they basically put him into a contract where he has to serve them for the rest of their lives and his life or something like that, basically for all of eternity. And so the Grim Reaper is basically their pet. And Grim, and just the show overall, are so sarcastic, and I love it so much. It's where I've gotten my sense of humor from, my very dry, just probably relatively mean-spirited humor just in real life. I probably got it from this show. I'm going to be honest with you. This and my very dry humor from Ed, Edd and Eddy, I think, have correlated to make me, Michael Goosebumps fan. And I don't have words for how much I love Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. I've watched so much of this show. I've started rewatching the whole show again on Amazon Prime recently. I think all of it's on there. I believe it is. I could be wrong, but I believe everything is listed on there. But I'm slowly working my way through all that again because I love it so much. And I just have such a blast. This show is so great at being a parody, about being its own thing sometimes. And this episode is so much a great example of how Maxwell Adams created one of the best cartoons ever to exist. Now, by this time of this particular episode, of course, the episode opens up with this really amazing sci-fi type music. Like, you remember back in the 50s and 60s when you'd have sci-fi horror films and thrillers having that little noise in their sound, like in the soundtrack for the movies and stuff? That really high-pitched ringing noise. I forgot what it is, but the instrument's the thing where you put your hand in the air and like touch airwaves and stuff. But anyway, they have that as like the soundtrack for this. So immediately the soundtrack is even better than what we typically get from Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Just the score in general works, I think. Which score is different from a soundtrack, but that's what I meant, a score. It's beautifully orchestrated. I love it. It just gives me chills every time I put this DVD in around October, around Halloween time, and start watching it. I love it every single time. And it does such a good job too. Excuse me, I choked on my own spit. I got excited, excuse me. It does such a good job of capturing the feeling of going trick-or-treating and the feeling of being out there with your friends. Even though Billy and Mandy are very different, like I said, the show has a lot of sarcasm to it. Not only is Grim himself, the Grim Reaper, very sarcastic, but you also have Billy being an absolute idiot. He's just a dummy, period. And he's hilarious. Everything he gets into, I always love it, and it makes me laugh. I love the actor for that, and I'll get into the actors a little bit later. This is probably going to be a relatively lengthy thing, like Goosebumps video, just because I want to talk so much in depth about this, and it deserves all the attention I could possibly give it. This was coming out around the time when you had the Cartoon Network Friday Nights thing, and I think that might have even been when it premiered, actually. I could be wrong, but I think it premiered on a Friday night, when Halloween was once upon a time on a Friday. And I remember absolutely falling in love with this, because of course I was obsessed with things like Goosebumps at the time, and things like the horror movies I got to watch, like Halloween with Michael Myers and stuff like that. So the idea of a man having his head cut off and having a pumpkin for a head, on a kid's show, mind you. There's no gore, no blood, anything like that, but it's very much just flat out said he was decapitated, and they gave him a pumpkin head. But we'll get there in a second. I won't tell you too much right now. I'm not going to spoil the whole episode for you, but I will tell you quite a bit about it. That whole concept of a man with a pumpkin for a head always fascinated me when I was a kid. Like the idea of like Sleepy Hollow type stuff. Like I loved stuff like that. Beetlejuice. I loved Beetlejuice when I was a kid, and it scares me now when I'm an adult still. I mean, it terrifies me. But I love it, you know, like this Tim Burton feeling that Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy sort of has, but not to the extent of like his animated short films, or not short films, but his animated stop motion movies. It's not like that. It's just a beautifully colored, beautifully written, and fun written, and absolutely hilarious for that matter when it comes to the comedy. It's probably one of the best things ever written. Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy in general. But you also have the other character, Mandy, the little girl, who is always mean. She never smiles. I think there's like one or two episodes where something happened that made her smile, but she's never actively smiled, really. She just kind of goes around all the time like this. you know, and Billy's always the complete opposite, being goofy and silly and always happy about absolutely everything. Great case in point here, you know, when he meets Jack, the jack-o'-lantern man guy, he puts a skunk in Billy's bag when Billy asks for a trick-or-treating thing, and he says, okay, trick, and he throws a skunk down in Billy's bag, and Billy, like, talks about how he's always wanted, like, a pet skunk, right? And the skunk, of course, sprays him, and Billy, with red, teary eyes and a huge amount of mucus just pouring out of his nose, is like, I think he likes me. I'm going to tell you right now, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, if you haven't seen this, it's probably the most quotable show of all time. And this particular episode in general, I would say is probably the most quotable thing I've ever seen in my life. I love things like Kevin Smith's Clerks. I love so many things. Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, Iron Man. I love so many things out there that are very quotable movies and TV shows and books and all that stuff. But nothing compares to Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy's episode, Jacked Up Halloween. This is so good. Like, I want to start from the beginning of where the plot kind of starts off. Basically, Billy doesn't know that tonight is Halloween, and he's watching commercials on TV of a man having like a log chainsaw chopping thing, like some kind of TV show trying to sell you chainsaws, and he's scared by this, and he hears a knock at the door that scares him to death, and he thinks it might be the man from the TV show. It turns out it's his best friend Mandy and their other best friend Grim, who happens to, like I said, also kind of be their pet. And they tell him it's Halloween. He dresses up as the Grim Reaper, of all people, because Mandy and Grim have dressed up like Hamlet, and then Grim, they took his head, because his head is removable, and made him into the skull for Hamlet. So I thought that was kind of fun. I've always enjoyed that. But Billy dresses up like the Grim Reaper. He puts on a cloak and everything, and he tells Grim he's going to use his actual scythe. Now, the thing with the scythe is that it actually has abilities and powers. It can cut open dimensions and open up portals and stuff to the demonic world and all kinds of different things in general. Now, it turns out, after they go trick-or-treating and they get in trouble with this big old lady and stuff they steal candy from because she's so mean to them, and they show her the point of how mean she is by not wanting to share candy with kids at all, even though she has tons of it. Basically, Billy and Mandy and Grim go out into a cemetery to eat all the candy they stole, and this is kind of just taking a break at the current moment before they go out for some more trick-or-treating. And they also have this subplot running throughout the episode. It's one of my favorite jokes ever, from Billy and Mandy or otherwise, of one of the other best friends from this TV show is named Irwin. And he's a little black fella, he has glasses on, he's very nerdy, but he has an obsession and love for Mandy, and he always wants her to kiss him and stuff. And she won't, because she likes to pull pranks on him and stuff, but not because it makes her happy, just because she can't stand him. Irwin's desperation to be with Mandy has always been one of the biggest highlights of that show. Always. It's just funny. I don't know what to tell you. But this particular episode, Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween, it takes that love that we all had for the Irwin obsession with Mandy and highlights it so well in this episode to the point where it is absolutely hilarious. I think this is one of the funniest things ever created. Not just Billy and Mandy, but this particular episode of the show. It's so creative. It's so wild and wacky and silly and fun. I just adore it. I could not recommend it enough to you if you haven't seen it. But Irwin keeps trying to get a costume together, and they go to his house and they talk to him, and he's dressed up like a princess, right? They basically tell him, no, you're going to change clothes and get a new costume. And throughout the episode, he keeps popping up with a new costume. At one point, he dresses like a turtle. And this is one of my favorite things I've ever seen in anything ever. And I think it just proved the genius of Cartoon Network in those days, before crap like Flapjack started coming out, or Chowder, or any of those garbage cartoons they started making. You can already tell from this video compared to most of my videos, I'm very passionate about my Billy and Mandy and my old Cartoon Network and my 90s and early 2000s animation on TV for kids television. But anyway, that's not the point. I'm very nostalgic, and this is a great example of how nostalgic I get about certain things. So one of the things that Irwin dresses up as in the episode, and I have to tell you this because I don't want to spoil it for you, he dresses up like a turtle, right? And he comes to them, and he, for some reason in his costume, he has a small tail attached to the back, like most turtles, right? And somehow, even though Irwin's just a regular old teenage boy, or not even teenage, but just a kid, somehow the tail is moving, right? So you assume, like, this is just really weird and eerie and creepy. And Irwin is talking about what his costume is, what kind of turtle he is. And then he holds up a hand of eggs, right? And he's like... he tells Mandy, the girl that he's obsessed with, he's like, and these are my eggs. pretty creepy, eh, Mandy? And it's just, every time that I hear that soundbite, that recording of that line, every time I hear it, I laugh. I laugh so hard. I don't know what it is. It probably isn't funny for my impersonation of it, but I'm telling you, dude, the awkwardness of Erwin when he says that, it just proves the genius of this show and how funny it was. How clever it was, even at the time. Kids' entertainment is nothing like this anymore, and it just sucks. I hate the fact that we don't have things like Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and the fact that that's not still running, but freaking SpongeBob is. I love SpongeBob, don't get me wrong. I adore it. One of my things I grew up on. I obsess over SpongeBob. But it ain't Billy and Mandy. And Billy and Mandy was not SpongeBob. It was too creative. I don't know what happened. I don't know why they canceled the show. It was great. It deserves so much more time. Even Rugrats lasted longer than Billy and Mandy. And I love some Rugrats too, don't get me wrong, but I love Billy and Mandy. It's perfect. There's so many great things and memories I have off the top of my head of this show, like the Harry Potter jokes, where they had actual like parodies of that. Because like I said, sometimes they did just straight up parodies of things. The Pokemon parody episodes, if anybody remembers that. And I'll talk more about this stuff one day when I get around, God willing, to watching all of Billy and Mandy in its whole, and then I get to talk about it here on the channel. I'll try to do it at some point. It's going to be a long time from now, probably next year in 2020 if I'm alive. But, yeah, I adore the show. In this episode, it slowly starts going from the whole subplot with Erwin and the whole trick-or-treating thing to now that Billy has the real Grim Reaper scythe. When they're sitting in the cemetery, they're talking, and they find out from Grim that there is a guy who used to be a really bad prankster, like 100 years or so before the current time that this takes place. And this guy pranked everybody all the time, and he didn't know how to stop. That was the thing. He didn't know how to stop, and he kept pissing people off in the town, in the village of Endsville, which is where they all live. And at one point, the villagers framed Jack, the guy who's the prankster, with a gift that they sent to the queen. And basically, a knight in shining armor, gets sent to Jack's house to put an axe in his back, and he does. And Grim, at this particular point, was sent to go tell Jack, like, hey, you're dying, I'm gonna take you away now. And Jack tricks Grim by taking a feather off of his hat and tickling the Grim Reaper until he laughs into hysterics on the floor. And he grabs the Grim Reaper scythe, the same one that Billy has at the current moment, and he tells him, if you give me immortal life, I'll give you your scythe back. And so Grim does, but Grim also does not like being cheated, so he chops off Jack's head. And it's not shown, there's no gore or blood, this was a Cartoon Network show, but it's flat out said over and over again, things like decapitation, things like, they took his head, you cut his head off, is what Billy says to Grim, all kinds of stuff. They don't shy away from the fact of what it is. They don't play the kids like they're stupid in old 2000 cartoons. It's what I love about this stuff. And it's genius. And then basically Billy encounters Jack, and Jack finds out that Billy has the scythe because of the argument they get into. The whole thing with the skunk I talked about happened as well. And now Jack and Billy are going around trying to release demons that are supposedly Jack's friends into the world to possess pumpkins so they can take over the town and the city and the world and everything. So now there's Billy and Jack teaming up, even though Billy's stupid, so he doesn't really mean to. He doesn't know it's going to be the end of the world, basically. But there's those two marching around with a bunch of giant pumpkins that are possessed by demons. And now they're trying to find Grim, because apparently Jack wants his revenge on Grim, and then Mandy's involved in all this too. And then Erwin is trying to find all of his costumes. Now, I know I told you a ton of the episode. It's 20 minutes long. It's hard not to tell you too much and tell you the setup of it. But I'm telling you right now, I promise you, if you love Goosebumps, I think you will love Billy and Mandy. Billy and Mandy, to me, as creative and fun, and again, it's very much a parody sometimes too of different things, it has that dark, hilariously dark humor that I've never seen any other cartoon have. Maybe Courage the Cowardly Dog, a little bit, maybe, but better, like better. Courage was genuinely scary when I was a kid. It still creeps me out in certain things, like the Slabs episode. We all know the Slabs episode. If you watch Courage the Cowardly Dog, you know about the Slabs and returning the Slabs. Scary stuff, but Billy and Mandy was not scary. It was just fun and hilarious, and that's what this episode was. And I watch it every single year, and I love it. I don't care if it's the wonderful animation, the wonderful coloring, even when CGI is included into the show itself for certain animation purposes, like cutting open portals and stuff. It doesn't look like crap, like Dragon Ball Super mixing drawn animation with CGI animation. Again, I'm very passionate about this because I hate how animation is treated nowadays, and Billy and Mandy, every time I watch this episode, it proves how well done this show was, and how well done cartoons were in general at that time. It's amazing to me. I can't get over the fact of how good this episode is every single year that I watch it again. And it never gets old. Again, between the music and the voice actors themselves, and I want to talk about the voice actors themselves. I want to give their names here so they have the respect that they're given. Grey Griffin playing Mandy, she's incredible. I absolutely love her acting. I think she's hilarious here, her very dry humor. Greg Eagles, who plays the Grim Reaper himself, I think he's great. He's always such a highlight. I love how the Grim Reaper also has a Jamaican accent, by the way. And the Jamaican accent really works for me, especially with the humor of the show. It just does. And then you had Richard Stephen Horvitz playing Billy, and he's hilarious too. But one person that never gets any credit at all is Wayne Knight. Wayne Knight played Jack-o'-lantern. His performance, I've watched a lot of cartoons, and I've watched a lot of animation in my life, and I've watched a lot of Billy and Mandy. Wayne Knight's performance as Jack in this episode is incredible. He is so funny, and I'm shocked that they never brought Jack-o'-lantern back onto the show. As far as I know, I don't think they ever brought him back for any kind of cameo, any kind of background appearance, or anything like that. I cannot believe that they did not do that, because he's great. Wayne Knight killed this role. He did everything that he could have possibly done to make this role fantastic, whether it be the Jack-o'-lantern's laugh, whether it be just... And even the character design, like the look of the Jack-o'-lantern, I love it. I think he looks incredible. He's just great in this episode. He fits so well into that world. And having their whole revenge plot and everything works really well too. And then the whole overall Maxwell Adams humor for this show is just perfect. I adore it so much, and I could not tell you another word for it. It's just perfect. It's amazing. And it hits me in the nostalgia every single time that I watch this show. And also, Vanessa Marshall. Vanessa Marshall plays Irwin, and she deserves a lot of credit too, because she's one of the best highlights of this particular episode. I love it. I love it so much. It's just a fantastic TV show, and just a fantastic particular episode here that I'm talking about too. Again, I'm sure you could watch it on Amazon Prime, or even if you can't, I'm sure it's listed somewhere on the internet where you can get your hands on it and watch it. Even if you don't want to just buy the DVD, even though the DVD is probably a little pricey now, possibly. I love it, and I cherish it, and I have been watching it for the last 16 years of my life, and I do not regret it. I am turning 25 in November, and I have basically watched it since I was like 9 or 10 years old. Like, I am obsessed with this episode. I think it's one of the best things that's ever been produced from Cartoon Network. I think it's one of the best shows ever produced, ever, animation-wise, or just anything in general, television-wise. There is nothing like Billy and Mandy, nor will there ever be. And like I said, at some point, I'm hoping, God willing, that maybe next year I can watch all of the episodes of Billy and Mandy all the way through and do a whole, like, review Goosebumps, things like Goosebumps thing here on the channel talking about it, because I adore it, and I think it deserves so much more entertainment and viewing and everything else. I would love to see Billy and Mandy come back, but honest to God, the way politics are anymore, I would hate to see them ruin it. If they ruined it, I would never let it go. I would never let it go. Maxwell Adams deserves better. Billy and Mandy deserves better. It just does. But anyway, I'm going to stop rambling now. When it comes to Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween on this amazing little DVD that I love so much, which, by the way, you would think that I would do reviews for most of the episodes on these DVD boxes. They don't really have all nothing but Halloween episodes. There's like a Courage the Cowardly Dog episode, there's a Powerpuff Girls episode, but none of these are creepier episodes, but they're not Halloween episodes. You know what I mean? Like, they're just kind of there. Ed, and Eddie's episode on this is the one of them going to that junk planet thing, if you remember that, where they went to the junkyard and they pretend they were like on another planet in a sci-fi film. It's Halloween-y. It works for a Halloween type thing, but it's not strictly a Halloween episode where you have like Halloween decorations and stuff. It's not like that. So I don't really include those. You know, if I ever get a chance to sit down and talk about those shows, maybe I will. It wouldn't be like a thing like Goosebumps show, but you know, if I ever had the chance, I would talk about them. But like I said, the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy episode on this and the Johnny Bravo episode are absolutely incredible. I watch them every single year back to back. Every single year. For the last 16 years, I've watched them. I don't know how long it's been for Johnny Bravo, but I have been watching it since I've at least had this DVD, so about 15 years probably for that. I don't know when that episode premiered, but I'll talk about it more when I get to the review for that. Anyway, Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween, it's incredible. It's perfect. Like I said, if I had to rate this on a 5-star basis, there's no question. It's getting a 5 out of 5. A high 5 out of 5. If I could surpass a 5 out of 5, I would for this particular episode. And maybe even for the show itself, because it's perfect. It is so funny and so great. if you wanted Looney Tunes type stuff, even like a darker Looney Tunes in 2000 whatever, this was the show. This was the show, and this episode in particular made it even more fun because this was even darker than most of Billy and Mandy's humor. It just worked incredibly well. Yeah, some of the jokes are kind of immature. There's a lot of fart stuff in here, but not like dumb fart stuff. You know what I mean? Like not stuff like Larry the Cable Guy, which I like Larry the Cable Guy, but I'm not saying it's not like that kind of immaturity. These are cleverly placed, in my opinion. These are actually funny and well done. So I recommend it. This is not like a thing that only kids could like. My dad and I used to watch Billy and Mandy all the time when I was growing up, and he hates cartoons. He likes things like Looney Tunes, some of the old things he grew up with. He prefers that stuff, but he loved Billy and Mandy when we used to watch this together when I was growing up, before my parents split up. He liked the show a lot. We used to watch it on Saturdays and Sundays. So, you know, this show, it's not just for kids. Please don't take it like that. Please give Billy and Mandy the benefit of the doubt and watch this episode for Halloween this year. I think you'll love it, even if you watch it before Halloween. I think you'll love it. It's just incredible, plain and simple, and I highly recommend it, and I could not recommend it enough to you. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Have you ever seen Billy and Mandy before? Have you ever seen this particular episode, Jacked Up Halloween? Put your thoughts and comments down in the comment section down below. I would love to hear what you have to say about this episode and about the show overall. Do you remember this show? Younger people that are watching this video that happen to be on my channel for Goosebumps stuff, have you ever heard of this show? Have you ever seen it? I would love to talk to you about this. I would love for you to check it out if your parents would let you, or if anybody would give you a chance where you could buy us a couple episodes on like Amazon Prime or something. You're missing out if you haven't seen this show before. I mean, especially if you love cartoons, like myself. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Put them down below, guys. Thank you for watching. 5 out of 5 for me. No questions about it. Thank you for watching. God bless you today, and goodbye. And happy Halloween, by the way. Be careful about that. Be careful where you go, what you do. Be careful who you talk to. Keep your eyes peeled. All that good stuff. Anyway, thank you. God bless you. Goodbye.